The creak of the floorboards became my constant companion after the children went to bed. Our old farmhouse, nestled deep in the woods of Ashridge Hollow, seemed alive with its own uneasy spirit. The walls whispered at night, and the roof groaned under the weight of invisible burdens. It was as though the house itself held its breath, waiting for something. Or someone. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows in their frames, but it was a sound I had grown accustomed to over the years. The isolation of Ashridge Hollow came with its own soundtrack. The cries of owls, the rustle of branches, and the haunting sigh of the wind weaving through the forest. Tonight, though, the sounds felt heavier, closer, as if the hollow had drawn its curtains tighter around us. Upstairs, my children slept, oblivious to the unease that prickled at the edges of my mind. Olivia, my eldest, was 9 and clever beyond her years. She often watched me with curious eyes, asking questions that were far too deep for a child her age. The twins, Ethan and Ellie, were only 5, their giggles and tiny hands a constant comfort to me. But tonight the house was too quiet. Even their soft snores, usually a lullaby, seemed distant. I sat by the fire, knitting half-heartedly, my fingers fumbling with the yarn. The clock on the mantel chimed 11. Daniel had gone out to the barn earlier in the evening. A nightly chore he never seemed to rush. He said the cows needed tending, but I often wondered why it took him so long. Lately he'd been distant, his laughter more rare and his eyes clouded with thoughts he didn't share. Whispers in the village had reached me. Rumors of a woman at the market he'd been seen speaking with. I told myself they were just that, whispers. Daniel loved me. We'd built this life together, brick by brick. 12 years of marriage could withstand a few shadows, couldn't it? But the shadows seemed to linger longer these days. I rose from the armchair, my shawl draped loosely around my shoulders. I glanced out the window. The barn stood in the distance, its silhouette stark against the moonless sky. A faint glow flickered from within. My heart tightened. He'd been gone for over an hour. Just go check, I whispered to myself, trying to push away the unease. The cold bit at my skin as I stepped outside. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. Gravel crunched under my boots as I made my way toward the barn. The wind pressed against me, almost as if it wanted to push me back. Daniel, I called, my voice breaking the stillness. There was no response. The barn door was ajar, swaying slightly as though caught in a rhythm with the wind. A faint orange glow spilled from within, flickering as if from a lantern. My steps slowed as I approached, dread curling around my chest like a vine. Inside, the barn was warmer than I expected, the scent of hay and animals mingling with something sharper, more metallic. Daniel stood near the far corner, his back to me. He was speaking, his voice low and urgent. For a moment, I thought there was someone else with him, but as I stepped inside, I saw only empty shadows. Daniel, I called again, louder this time. He froze. His shoulders stiffened before he turned to face me, his expression unreadable. But his eyes betrayed him. Wide, fearful, and full of guilt. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, his voice strained. "I should ask you the same," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "You've been out here for over an hour. Is everything all right?" "It's nothing," he said quickly, too quickly. "Just tending to the animals." "At this hour?" I pressed, taking a step closer. The barn felt larger than it should, the lantern's light unable to chase away the shadows that seemed to cling to the walls. Daniel's hand shot out as if to stop me from coming closer. "Just go back inside. It's late." "Daniel, what's going on?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "You've been acting strange for weeks. Is this about the rumors? Is there someone else?" His face fell, and for a moment I thought he might deny it. But before he could answer, a sound rippled through the barn. A soft rustling like the flutter of wings. It came from the shadows, the deepest corner where the lantern's light couldn't reach. "You need to go," Daniel said, his voice shaking. "Take the kids and leave. Now." My breath caught in my throat. "What is that?" But he didn't answer. His eyes darted to the darkness, and for the first time, I saw true terror in his face. Something moved in the shadows. Something that shouldn't have been there. The shadow shifted in the corner, not like a trick of light or a passing cloud, but something deliberate, intentional. I'd never seen anything so unnatural. My breath caught in my throat and my instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet remained rooted in place. "Daniel," I whispered, barely able to form the words. What is that?" He didn't answer. His face was ashen, his eyes locked on the writhing darkness. "Please," he said again, his voice trembling. "Take the kids and leave." "I'm not leaving you," I said, finding a sliver of strength in the fear that threatened to drown me. The rustling grew louder, filling the barn with a noise that wasn't quite wings, wasn't quite leaves. It was something in between, a sound that didn't belong in this world. The shadows stretched, tendrils of darkness spilling across the floor like spilled ink. "It's too late," Daniel muttered, more to himself than to me. He took a step back, his shoulders slumping as if some unseen weight pressed down on him. I thought I could stop it. I thought. The shadows coiled tighter, forming the shape of a figure. A woman, or at least what once resembled one. Her form was impossibly thin, her movements too fluid, like smoke caught in a draft. She stepped forward, her face obscured, but her presence radiated malice. "Daniel," the figure hissed, her voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "You can't hide from me." "I didn't call you," he said, his voice cracking. "I haven't done anything." Her laughter was low and guttural, a sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, but you did. Bargains always come due, Daniel. Did you think you could cheat me? Bargains? Cheat?" My mind raced, trying to make sense of her words. I looked at Daniel, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he kept his gaze on the creature, fear etched into every line of his face. "I didn't mean for this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What did you do?" I demanded, my voice rising despite the terror clawing at my chest. "Daniel, what is she talking about?" "I was trying to protect us," he said, finally looking at me. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. "The farm, the kids, you..." I didn't think it would go this far. The figure moved closer, her feet never quite touching the ground. Her face began to take shape, hollow eyes and a mouth that twisted into something too wide, too sharp. "He made a deal," she said, her gaze shifting to me. "Your husband, so desperate to keep his precious family safe, promised me his soul. But then he tried to run. Is that true?" I whispered, tears burning my eyes. Daniel's silence was answer enough. "And now," the figure continued, her voice almost gleeful, "I'll take what's owed." She lunged, a blur of darkness and malice. Daniel shoved me aside, his body colliding with hers. They crashed into the shadows, their forms becoming indistinct. His screams echoed through the barn, a sound that tore through me. "Run," he shouted, his voice breaking. "Get the kids and run." I didn't hesitate. My legs carried me out of the barn, my heart pounding as I sprinted back to the house. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop until I was inside, bolting the door behind me. Upstairs, the children were awake, their eyes wide with fear. "Mama?" Olivia asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "We have to go," I said, scooping up the twins. "Right now." Outside, the wind howled louder, and the shadows began to creep toward the house. The house groaned, its walls seeming to shudder under the weight of the encroaching shadows. I gathered the children, my hands trembling as I tried to remain calm for their sake. Olivia, ever perceptive, clung to my arm, her wide eyes searching mine for answers. "Mama, what's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're leaving, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile that I knew didn't reach my eyes. "Just stay close to me." The twins clung to each other, their small faces pale. I grabbed a blanket from the couch and wrapped it around them, hoping it would provide some semblance of comfort. My mind raced, searching for a plan. The car was parked outside, but the shadows were everywhere. The road to the village felt impossibly far. A loud bang reverberated through the house, and I jumped, clutching the children tighter. The windows rattled and the faint glow of lantern light flickered ominously. The shadows were pressing against the glass, seeping through the cracks like smoke. "Stay here," I told Olivia, setting the twins down beside her. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace, my hands shaking. "I'll be right back." "No," Olivia cried, grabbing my arm. "Don't go, Mama." Her fear rooted me in place for a moment, but I knew I couldn't let this thing reach them. "I'll be quick," I promised, cupping her face. "Keep them safe, Olivia. Be brave." I moved to the door, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the wind. The shadows recoiled slightly as I stepped outside, as though surprised by my defiance. I brandished the poker, though it felt pitifully inadequate against the force surrounding us. "Leave us alone," I shouted into the night, my voice breaking. The shadows swirled, forming the vague outline of the figure from the barn. Her hollow eyes seemed to pierce through me. "You can't protect them," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "They'll be mine just as he is." Over my dead body, I spat, raising the poker. The figure laughed, a sound that made my blood run cold. "That can be arranged." Before I could react, the shadows surged toward me, a tidal wave of darkness. I swung the poker wildly, the metal passing through the void without resistance. The force knocked me backward and I hit the ground hard, the air leaving my lungs in a painful gasp. From inside the house, I heard Olivia scream. The sound galvanized me and I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the pain that shot through my body. I rushed back inside, slamming the door shut behind me. The children were huddled together, their faces streaked with tears. Olivia had positioned herself in front of the twins, clutching a kitchen knife she must have grabbed in my absence. "My brave, clever girl." "We're going to the car," I said, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at me. "Stay close to me and don't let go of each other. Understand?" They nodded, their small hands gripping mine and each other's. Together we moved toward the back door where the car was parked just a few feet away. Every step felt like an eternity, the shadows pressing closer, their whispers growing louder. As we stepped outside, the cold air bit at our skin. The car was so close, yet it felt impossibly far. I tightened my grip on the children, my heart pounding as we ran. The shadows surged around us, reaching with claw-like tendrils. We made it to the car and I threw open the door, ushering the children inside. "Lock the doors and stay down," I instructed, my voice shaking. As I slid into the driver's seat, the figure appeared again, her form materializing in front of the car. Her hollow eyes met mine and she smiled, a chilling expression that promised this wasn't over. The engine roared to life and I gripped the wheel tightly. "Hold on," I told the kids, slamming my foot on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, and the figure dissolved into shadows, her laughter echoing in the night as we sped away into the darkness. The car rumbled down the winding road, its tires struggling against the gravel and mud that clung to the wheels like desperate hands. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles white, as the children huddled together in the back seat. Their small, trembling voices were muted by the storm that raged outside, lightning illuminating the thick forest on either side of the road. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, his gaze fixed on the rearview mirror. Every so often he would mutter something under his breath, words that I couldn't make out but felt seeped in fear. His fingers tapped nervously against his knee, a rhythm that mirrored the frantic beat of my own heart. "Is it following us?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice tight. "Just keep driving." The children whimpered as another crack of lightning split the sky, and Olivia reached out to take the twins' hands. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own voice wavered. "Mama and Papa will protect us." I wanted to believe her words, but the shadows from the barn haunted me, their unnatural movements and the malice they carried etched into my memory. The creature, the woman, hadn't just been a threat. She had been a promise, a harbinger of something far worse. The headlights carved weak tunnels of light through the suffocating darkness, the trees looming like silent sentinels. But then the engine sputtered, choking on itself before the car slowed to a crawl. "No, no, no," I muttered, my foot pressing harder on the gas pedal. The car groaned in protest before stalling completely. The silence that followed was deafening. "What happened?" Daniel asked, his voice sharp. "I don't know," I snapped, panic rising. "It just stopped." The storm raged on, rain hammering against the windows. Lightning illuminated the road ahead, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing in the distance. But when the light faded, there was nothing but the empty road. "We can't stay here," Daniel said, his voice low. "She'll find us. What do you suggest?" I asked, turning to face him. "We're miles from the nearest town, and the car won't start." Before he could answer, a sound rose above the storm, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. It came from the woods, from somewhere unseen but dangerously close. "Mama?" Ellie's voice was barely a whisper. "What's that noise?" "Stay in the car," Daniel said, his tone firm. He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a rusted wrench, the closest thing to a weapon we had. "You're not going out there," I said, grabbing his arm. "I have to," he replied, his eyes meeting mine. "I won't let it get to the kids." Before I could protest further, he opened the door, the storm immediately soaking him as he stepped out. He moved cautiously, the wrench held tightly in his hand. The growling grew louder, more insistent, as if the creature was toying with us. "Daniel, get back in the car," I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by the thunder. And then I saw it. The figure emerged from the woods, its form shifting and undulating as if it were made of the shadows themselves. Its eyes burned like embers, locking onto Daniel with an intensity that made my stomach twist. It was the same creature from the barn, but now it seemed larger, more solid, more real. Daniel swung the wrench, but it passed through the creature as if it were smoke. The thing laughed, a sound that didn't belong in this world. It lunged at him and he fell to the ground, the wrench clattering uselessly beside him. "Mama!" Olivia screamed, her voice piercing through my fear. I turned to the back seat, my children's terrified faces giving me the strength I needed. I grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the storm. The rain lashed against my skin and the wind threatened to knock me off my feet. "Leave him alone," I shouted, shining the flashlight at the creature. To my surprise, it recoiled, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. The light seemed to weaken it, and for the first time I saw fear in its glowing eyes. "Get back in the car," Daniel yelled, scrambling to his feet. "Now." But I didn't move. I took a step forward, the flashlight steady in my hand. The creature hissed, retreating further into the shadows. "You're not taking my family," I said, my voice steady despite the terror that gripped me. It stared at me for a long moment, its ember eyes narrowing. And then, with a final hiss, it vanished, dissolving into the storm. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I helped Daniel back to the car, both of us drenched and shaking. The children clung to each other, their faces pale but alive. The car's engine sputtered to life on the third try, as if the creature's presence had been the only thing keeping it still. We drove in silence, the road stretching endlessly before us. But I knew this wasn't over. The shadows were still out there waiting, watching, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. The road seemed endless, winding through an ocean of shadows that pressed against the car like unseen hands. Every flicker of the trees, every howl of the wind, felt like the breath of the creature following us. The children were silent now, their small forms huddled together in the back seat. Daniel's face was pale, his hands trembling as he clutched the wrench. I gripped the steering wheel, the headlights barely carving through the oppressive darkness. "It's not over," Daniel said quietly, his voice breaking the silence. "She'll come again. Then we'll face her," I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. But we're not stopping. Ahead, the forest thinned, revealing the faint outline of a dilapidated church. Its steeple leaned precariously, the wooden cross at its peak splintered and weathered by time. Despite its disrepair, it radiated a sense of safety, a fragile beacon in the storm. Without hesitation, I turned the wheel, guiding the car onto the narrow path that led to its doors. The church creaked as we entered, its wooden floors protesting under our weight. The air inside was heavy with dust and decay, but there was a strange warmth, a faint hum of something ancient and protective. Olivia held Ellie and Ethan close as Daniel and I barricaded the door with a heavy pew. "Do you think she can get in?" Olivia asked, her voice small. "Not here," I said, hoping the lie sounded convincing. "This place will keep us safe." But even as I spoke, I felt the shadows gathering outside. They pressed against the stained glass windows, warping the light into grotesque shapes. The air grew colder, and the hum of safety I'd felt moments ago began to falter. "She's here," Daniel said, his voice tight. He clutched the wrench like a lifeline, his knuckles white. "What does she want?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "You," a voice whispered, so close it could have been inside my ear. I spun around, but there was no one there. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice echoing through the empty church. The stained glass shattered, shards raining down as the creature emerged. Her form was more solid now, her ember eyes blazing with fury. She moved with an unnatural grace, her limbs stretching impossibly long as she stepped closer. "You can't run from me," she hissed. "You took what was mine, and now I will take what's yours." "You can't have them," I said, stepping in front of my children. "Whatever you want, take it from me, but leave them alone." The creature tilted her head, her smile widening to reveal too many teeth. "Brave words, but empty. You cannot bargain with what you do not understand." He lunged, but this time I was ready. I grabbed the flashlight and turned it on her, the beam piercing through the darkness. She recoiled, her form flickering like a flame in the wind. "Light," Daniel said, his voice urgent. "She can't stand the light." "Then help me," I shouted. Daniel grabbed the remaining candles from the altar, lighting them with trembling hands. Their glow joined the flashlight, pushing the shadows back. The creature screamed, her form twisting and writhing as she tried to escape the light. The walls of the church seemed to pulse, the air thick with energy. "Mama," Ethan cried, pointing to the shattered window. More shadows poured in, tendrils of darkness that clawed at the light. "We need more," Daniel said. "Keep the light steady." I held the flashlight firm, its beam unwavering. The creature shrieked, her ember eyes fading as the light consumed her. The shadows retreated, but the air grew colder, the storm outside intensifying. "It's not enough," I realized, the weight of despair pressing down on me. "We need more light." Olivia's voice cut through the chaos. "The bell tower," she said. "If we can light it, the whole hollow will see." Daniel and I exchanged a glance, understanding passing between us. "Stay here," I told the children. "We'll be back." We climbed the narrow stairs of the bell tower, the wood groaning under our weight. At the top, the storm raged, lightning illuminating the hollow in brief, blinding flashes. The bell hung above us, its surface tarnished but sturdy. "Help me," Daniel said, grabbing the lantern that hung from his belt. Together we lit it, the flame catching and growing as we hoisted it toward the bell. The light burst forth, spilling into the darkness like a tidal wave. The creature screamed, her form disintegrating as the light consumed her. The shadows writhed one last time before dissolving into nothingness. The storm began to fade, the oppressive weight lifting from the air. When we returned to the children, the church was quiet. The shattered glass and claw marks remained, but the darkness was gone. The hollow was still, its suffocating grip broken. "Is it over?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling. I knelt beside her, pulling her close. "For now," I said, though I couldn't bring myself to promise more. We left the church at dawn, the rising sun bathing the hollow in golden light. The road stretched before us, endless and uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, hope flickered in the distance.